Good evening, everybody, and a very warm and hearty welcome to the Mitra Scientific Webinar on the subject of vector-borne diseases diagnostic methods. We're very pleased to have with us today Dr. M. Upendra-Srinivas. Dr. Srinivas is not only a qualified medical professional, he also holds a special healthcare management degree from the Indian School of Business. So he is both technically and commercially suited to give us the best insights into diagnostic methods on vector-borne diseases. He has over 2 decades of experience, and without further ado, we look forward to him sharing his experience and expertise with us over this session. People who have questions can put them in the chat box, and those will be answered towards the end of the session when Dr. Srinivas has completed his talk. Sir, you may share your screen and proceed, sir.
I think my screen is already shared.
You can run the PPT now, sir. You can hit the...
Can I run the PPT now?
Yes, you can run the PPT now.
It's already shared, and then I'm not able to see any chat box here. Probably I may have to call my...
No, it's okay. I can. It's there at the bottom of the screen. I'll let you know when the questions come in. I'll handle that part for you, sir.
And I'm not able to even see the audience also.
Audience this is a one-way discussion, sir, because the number of audience is a lot. So audience can see you, they can see me, they can see the screen that you've shared. Okay. So you can start with your slideshow.
I'm seeing only you.
Yes, you can only see me, and I'll also switch off my video after a minute once you start.
Right.
So you are the teacher for today, and we are all students.
Right. Great. Good evening, all of you. I hope a significant amount of people have already joined this session. And let me at the outset thank Mitra organizers for organizing such a very important topic. As monsoons are just around the corner, I think what best that we can discuss other than vector-borne diseases. Once the monsoon set in, if you are especially living in cities like Mumbai and any other coastal areas in the country, probably you'll be looking at a large chunk of vector-borne diseases that I don't have to tell this audience that how important this topic is. If you look at any hospital bed occupation during this part of the year, it will be mostly predominantly fever related, and most of them are vector-borne disease kind of a profile that you get to see these kind of patients and hospital admissions. So what best I can do in this particular session is I will quickly take you to a site where I have derived most of my information, because we have to do only those of vector-borne diseases which are relevant to our Indian context. So this data has been taken predominantly from National Center for Vector-Borne Disease Control program, which runs under the Department of Women and Family Welfare and all that. So in that, the diseases that whatever are mentioned, there are about 7 or 8 diseases which are mentioned, which are very much India-centric, though there are a lot of vector-borne diseases which are there worldwide. But today we're going to discuss only those kind of diseases which are prevalent in our country. So the diseases that are mentioned in that website are malaria, dengue, and chikungunya, filariasis, Japanese encephalitis, leishmaniasis, Zika virus. Zika virus has not been mentioned in that website. I have added it because it is also one of the significantly, very serious kind of a vector-borne infection in certain pockets in our country. So it is better that we discuss that as well. And scrub typhus, which is again a tick-borne kind of a vector-borne rickettsial diseases. So coming back to the most commonest out of all, malaria, which will be having so many cases this part of the year in any hospital admission. So let us talk and start with malaria. Malaria, you all know, I don't have to deal with the basics like what causes malaria, how it is spread, and what is the vector that it carries. So there is a significant burden of the disease. This again is a data which is updated till April 2024, that there is a significant amount of malarial disease even till now. But thankfully, the mortality, the death rates were not at all very high. When in fact, very, very abysmally low. That is a good sign. And especially when the news that malarial vaccine is also coming into the fore, then malaria, probably we are at some stage where we are controlling the disease in a much better way than actually before. So malarial situation, these are some of the states still have a very high degree of prevalence and incidence. And what what are the vectors that actually carry all the diseases which spread by these vectors? I mean, there are three main vectors. Vector is something which carries the disease-causing organism. So these vectors are mosquitoes, and there can be some sort of flies, especially in the context of leishmaniasis, where you have the vector in the form of sandfly, and the ticks are something which carry rickettsial diseases. Mosquito-borne diseases, malaria, chikungunya, dengue, and Zika virus, and most of them, some of these other filariasis is one disorder, but we can broadly classify them into acute and life-threatening disorders, which are vector-borne, and there are some chronic non-life-threatening vector-borne disorders like filariasis, leishmaniasis, and many other disorders which may not be of importance acutely, but because of the chronicity of the diseases that manifest, they have also a different set of diagnostic tools that we are looking at today. So coming with malaria, any malaria, now malaria diagnosis is not, it has not become that difficult in the current tools that we have in the laboratory. It can start with the clinical suspicion. The clinician will sound an alarm that this is what it looks like, a malarial disease, especially if somebody is living in a coastal area or any area like Mumbai and all. Fever, the first thing that comes to anybody's mind is malaria. Malaria, the tests are very simple, and you can go to complex level like molecular, but that generally is not required in basic diagnosis of malaria. And the disease suspicion starts with the clinician sounding an alarm that this could possibly be malaria. Though most of the illnesses that viral and the protozoal diseases that we are going to talk about will carry the same kind of disease profile, fever, non-specific symptoms, fever with different periodicities, and bony pains, body aches, and headaches, and all these will be very sort of non-specific symptoms which can happen not only with malaria but other viral diseases that we are going to discuss today. Malaria, once the suspicion is there, then the second thing that there are 5-part hematology automatic analyzers, which have a flow-based method of identifying the cells and giving a hemogram and a CBC picture. Most of them are well equipped in the scattergram that they can pick that malarial presence in a particular scatter patterns, especially in the basophil region in some. And if you look at a forward scatter and side scatter plot, there is a definite area where if that gets populated with a lot of dots, then you can possibly think of malaria. And there are other soft pointers in the CBC, like if you have even on the CBC hemogram patterns only, that there could be a possible malaria. The next subsequent step, what we do is you spread a smear and would want to have a look at it. And if the density of the parasite index is very high, you can actually find those gametocytes and trophozoites and the ring forms on the screening of the smears. Now with software tools which can actually read the cytomorphological pictures, they are also capable of detecting malarial intracellular malarial structures, and then that can also report in a very significantly with a high sensitivity and specificity patterns. Once that morphological limit, if you have parasite index is very high, more than 100 parasites per microliter, you can easily sometimes see in the thick areas, or you can even sometimes see in the thin areas as well if the smear is clearly spread out. So that is one way of finding out on a basic peripheral smear, which still remains a gold standard because of, there are a lot of sensitivity and specificity issues with other ancillary tools. Then we would want to always go back to the peripheral smear and confirm it, and that becomes the gold standard. The peripheral smear, having a look at the parasite, nothing beats that. So the gold standard still remains is a good peripheral smear examination, where you can identify the gametocytes and the trophozoites and ring forms of the parasite. Sometimes you can even make a differentiation of falciparum or vivax also, even by looking at smear. So if the smear is not able to detect, then what next? So there are certain other methods where we can make a quick diagnosis, which is called rapid diagnostic test, which basically looks at, before that, there is another method employed in certain of the laboratories, especially in the Tier 2 settings, is called quantitative Buffy-Coat method, which essentially takes the advantage of concentration of the sample and finding out these parasites with a specific fluorescent dye called acridin orange, and which reacts to the parasites, and that tubes, well, when put under the fluorescent microscope, you can detect these parasites. If the index is more, parasite index is more, then we can detect under the fluorescence in situ fluorescence microscope, you can detect that these parasites taking up and lit up with the fluorescence. That's how you can make a diagnosis. That's what is depicted in this picture. As I told you, one is peripheral smear, the other one is the fluorescence treated acridine orange treated Buffy coat method, and you can identify it. And the scatter plot of some of the hematology analyzers where we can identify that the malarial population is sitting in one place. So this is the QBC method where the malarial QBC tubes, which are coated with acridine orange, the sample is centrifuged. And then once the parasite is, takes up the fluorescent dye, it lights up on the fluorescence microscope, and you can make out that it is positive. And the sensitivity is a little better than what you see in peripheral smear with conventional staining. So the next tool that we can employ is, as I told you, is the rapid diagnostic methods, which we call the cards, malarial cards, or, which basically works on a principle called lateral flow assay or immunochromatographic method. The principle of that I will tell you in a little bit. So rapid diagnostic tests are essentially based on identification of certain of the antigens which are present on the malarial parasite. And out of that, there is one specific antigen which is specific for falciparum, which is called as histidine-rich protein, HRP2, which is very specific. If you can able to detect that on the lateral flow assay, which is found to be positive, then you are very sure that you are dealing with a falciparum case. And if you have, there are other two antigens which are commonly used in all the rapid cards. Each is aldolase and one is lactate dehydrogenase. These are Plasmodium species specific antigens, which again can be detected on the lateral flow assay methods. But these are pan-plasmodium, and they don't have any species restriction like what you see in HRP2 in the context of falciparum. So one particular advantage with LDH is that it can tell that the parasite is still viable, whereas the other two antigens, even if they are detected, it can't tell that the parasites are really viable. So this essentially helps us, especially post-treatment. Post-treatment, most of these parasites will be rendered non-viable and dead. In that, these particular antigens can still be positive till particular duration, especially in the context of HRP2. You can see it for almost like 10 days, it can still be positive. LDH being a test of viability of the parasite, once we treat that, probably this antigen will disappear. So coming to the principle of rapid diagnostic test, what we call as a lateral flow assay or immunochromatography. This is actually a strip which is enclosed in a plastic container and a band-like container. What actually is essentially deals with antigen-antibody reaction, and it has several compartments to allow this reaction to happen and to internally control and see whether the reaction is performed in a correct way or not. That has an inbuilt control system to assess whether the process has been properly conducted or not. So if you look at that, the lateral flow assay chamber or the spread of this instrument, what we have is a sample pad, which you usually see as a round chamber in which you put the sample and you add the conjugate, and there is a conjugate pad which is embedded with conjugate substance like gold or fluorophores or a lot of other conjugates that can be added in that region. And then you have a nitrocellulose membrane. This essentially is the one that we use in tests like where you have electrophoresis kind of a pattern, and that will allow these reagents to migrate. And in that nitrocellulose membrane component, we have an embedded test line and a control line. And in the control line, we will have an affinity ligands, which will bind to the excess of conjugate, which has not actually reacted with the intended antigen and antibody bound on the test line, and that will flow across the control line. And if the control line positive comes, then only the test is successful. If the control line won't be there, then our run itself is not correct. So followed by that control line, what we have is a wicking part of the entire this thing, or is a part where all these constituents will get absorbed. This is sort of what makes a lateral flow assay unit. And once everybody knows how to interpret that, there will be different bands in that lateral flow unit. Sometimes, there may be 2 lines also, depends upon how many antigens that we are detecting. If you are looking for a rapid malarial card where you are trying to differentiate falciparum along with Vivax, or there may be a scenario where there will be coexistent infections of Vivax as well as falciparum, then you will have 2 antigen bands, one identifying HRP antigen and the other identifying the pan-plasmodial antigen. And subsequently, you will have another band, which is a control band. Similarly, if you have a control band positive and a band that comes positive in the HRP1 along with pan-plasmodial, then we are sure that we are dealing with a Plasmodium falciparum infection. And if you have only a plasmodial pan-plasmodial antigen positive and HRP negative, control positive, then you can be dealing with any of the rest of the 3 species of the malarial parasite. That's how we have to read and interpret. This again is another, you call your test as invalid if you don't see any band in the control region. So comparison of the diagnostic methods. I mean, what if even sometimes if the clinical suspicion is strong and the parasite index is too low, even for the kind of RDT cards that you have, it will not be able to detect such a low index. Then what is the next methodology in which we can probably increase the accuracy of finding that is by doing molecular assays, which are currently these days available, which is capable of detecting the subspecies of malaria also. But only cost constraint is the only factor that will not allow any routine labs to conduct molecular tests for malarial detection. So most of the diagnosis, even to the range of almost like 95 to 99%, you can make with rapid malaria antigen tests and clinical profile, your peripheral smear examination. Most of your cases will get an accurate diagnosis with tools which go up to rapid malarial antigen testing. You don't routinely resort to doing molecular tests for diagnosing malaria in a day-to-day this thing. So a lot of innovations are happening, especially malaria. If there's a remote place, and innovations are coming now where they are utilizing not a fully, fully and complex molecular method, but a methodology called LAMP PCR. Is a method of nucleic acid detection, which is loop-mediated amplification, amplicon identification of a specific sequences of a malarial parasite, which can be done in a very simplistic manner, and that can be read by a mobile also. So this will enhance our ability to reach out to the areas where all these diagnostic tools are not available to make an accurate diagnosis. Sometimes we can adopt these tools and make a diagnosis remotely as well. So that takes us to the second common disease that we deal during the monsoon time, which is dengue. Dengue again is a mosquito-borne disease, and it is a flavivirus, RNA virus, and this is how the chronology of the disease happens at different stages. And once the mosquito bites and then the fever sets in, that's first day, you need to identify it, because we all know the seriousness of dengue diagnosis, because it has to be made on time. Otherwise, a lot of golden hours will be wasted, and sometimes they can get into a very serious kind of manifestations and then have a high degree of mortality in the hospital setting. So we need to start suspecting dengue very early in the course of illness, and that can happen only by detection of a more specific antigen, which is non-structural protein antigen, also called as NS1. Is a very popular test. NS1 antigen again can be, most of these viruses that what we are going to discuss today can be detected by rapid methods. They can be detected by the ELISA methods, depends upon at what stage of the disease we are dealing with the diagnosis of that particular patient. And they can be confirmatively be done and proven with the strong evidence only by doing molecular method. These are the only tests that we are going to discuss in all the diseases that we are discussing today. So NS1 is going to be picked up even on day 1, and the best methods for, for convenience, we all do rapid cards, and rapid cards also have a decent sensitivity and specificity, but the only disadvantage that they carry is that non-specific binding or false positives can sometimes be there if you have an antibody which is not related to the disease, but because of underlying autoimmune conditions like rheumatoid arthritis, SLEs. Those can be cross-reacting antibodies, and sometimes they can give false positive reactions we are doing and relying only on CARDs. So thereby, NS1 antigen can be even looked at by ELISA-based methods on serology, and is a very, very highly specific test, and that actually defines the diagnosis of dengue. So one has to resort to NS1, and it can be in a proper setting. Again, and even in dengue also, unless you do it by ELISA, these are some of the recommendations by WHO and Indian standards, where they say that NS1 is the most specific test and earliest test which can give an accurate diagnosis of dengue. And this can be done by cards also, but that will be termed as probable diseases if you have a right clinical setting. So again, just as in malaria, even in dengue also, there are some soft pointers. Once you get a sample, then you obviously the first thing that you do is a CBC, where you look at platelet counts. And apart from that, the soft pointers that you can pick up, which will sort of tell you that most probably you are dealing with dengue, even without doing dengue specific tests also, or there's a patient with fever and clinical profile which is matching with dengue. That information comes from the doctor. And then you can look at your CBC where the hematocrit will be very high. And if you have abnormal reactive plasma cells, which you can pick up on the peripheral smear, which has been shown in this slide. And if you have that, two of this combination, you have a platelet count which is very low, then 60% or 70% you are sure that you are dealing with a patient who is dengue positive, who is likely to be dengue positive. So these are there are certain other biochemical parameters also which can sort of give you an indication that this could possibly be dengue, and those are some of these albumins, AST ratio. These are all soft pointers that with that suspicion, then the next thing that what we would want to do is rapid cards. Rapid cards, again, now that the consensus and the recommendation is that along with NS1, usually IgG and IgM is an antibody which can be detected early in the disease. IgG is the one which is primarily used for identification of secondary dengue infection. So it is a antibody which indicates of chronic nature. So the consensus now has been evolved that you should have a combo of NS1 antigen detection along with a combo of IgG and IgM. If you have a combo of NS1 and IgM positive, then you are dealing with an acute kind of a dengue presentation. So this is the kind of combos that are available in the market. So where you have the luxury of identifying NS1 on day 1, and you can identify IgGM presence also if it is day 2, day 3, and day 4, then probably you are dealing with a strong diagnosis of a dengue. So as this is what the literature says, that you have to have an ideal combo. The next for dengue also, again, ELISA-based NS1 antigen assays are available, and that gives you a fair sort of sensitivity, specificity, and accuracy of the testing can be ensured with a NS1 ELISA-based testing. And if that also is not coming handy, then probably you can do a molecular assay as well. PCR kits are available to do that. And next disease is chikungunya, which is only concentrated in few pockets like Karnataka, Gujarat, and some of these areas where there are pockets, again, a mosquito-borne disease, viral disease, RNA viral disease. And this also initially the diagnostic criteria has to be IgM positivity on ELISA. And if it is a little late in the course, then probably you can identify by doing a molecular-based assay. The clinical manifestations here also being a predominantly arthralgic kind of a manifestation. You have sometimes similar picture as you can see in dengue. Some multiplex PCR-based assay kits are also available, where in one go you can identify dengue, chikungunya, and Zika virus also. Those kind of kits are also available. And if you are not very clear about what exactly is the underlying condition, after using all your rapid cards and ELISAs, if they are equivocal in their results, then probably you can resort to molecular testing and then resolve the issue. So these are the RDT rapid cards that are available for chikungunya, and then ELISA kits are also available. These are all mainly sandwich kind of ELISA methodologies. And subsequently, if those tests, if they have shown equivocal results, then one can resort to molecular identification of chikungunya virus. So filariasis is in difference with what we have dealt so far, is a disease of chronicity, and it is again a vector-borne disease spread by mosquito bite. And then the diagnosis of that is sometimes can be made on the peripheral smear if you make thick smears. But only thing is they have a tendency for nocturnal periodicity, and this parasite can be only picked up during the night times, and the sample has to be specifically drawn in those times, and specific thick films have to be made, and they are seen in conventional stains in the thickest areas of the smear. And sometimes if the parasite index is very low, then we can identify the antigen antibody kind of a mechanism in using rapid tests. And there are combo tests that are available, which again can differentiate whether it is an acute infection or a chronic infection. And these are all entities which are of chronic in nature. They don't have any significant morbidity, but only significant mortality, but only have a morbidity. So time can be taken in diagnosing these entities, but a confirmative diagnosis elsewhere is not happening with other modalities, then we can resort to molecular testing and then identify the right tissue and subject it to for molecular methods and obtain an accurate diagnosis in conditions like this. Sometimes we can have not only blood, if the patient presents with chylothorax and lymphatic filariasis, and also we can get diagnosis from those other specimens as well. Leishmaniasis is again a vector-borne, and it is a disease of chronicity. Lymphnodal, it can be visceral manifestation. It can involve all the organ systems. And then the way you can detect is gold standard again is morphology, identifying it from a tissue. You can actually culture them on bone marrow, or you can sometimes morphologically pick up these parasite bodies on bone marrow specimens. And again, cards are available, rapid cards are available, but there is no necessity of any rapid diagnosis in these particular scenarios. Then we can do a bit of ELISA testing, but once you morphologically you are very sure, then you don't have to resort to testing like based on ELISA. And if you really need in certain scenarios where the evidence is unequivocal, then probably may have to resort to molecular methods, which will give a proper and accurate diagnosis of leishmaniasis. So these tests are available, and especially IgG antibody for a specific antigen called K39. And if that antibody is found, then it indicates that leishmania infection is of chronic nature in that particular patient. So the other entity, which again is an acute entity and has got significant morbidity and mortality, is Japanese encephalitis, again a flavivirus group of RNA virus. The methodology of diagnostics is the same. If you are in need of a rapid diagnosis, you can apply rapid cards, which will identify IgM, and it doesn't enjoy a very specific antigen-based rapid card detection like dengue, where you have NS1. Here, you have to only resort to IgM, which is the first reacting antibody to the infection. And if you have presence of IgM, then you are dealing with an acute Japanese encephalitis infection. And IgG is a sign of chronicity that ELISAs are also available to identify this particular viral infection. So if you have to demonstrate with strong accuracy and evidence, then you have a molecular test also available for Japanese encephalitis, and that will sort of confirm the diagnosis with a very good evidence. So scrub typhus is a tick-borne disease, rickettsial disease, which are common in certain pockets of the country. And the diagnostic methodology is no different, but these are some of the illnesses which are anywhere between acute to chronic. You can call them as subacute. And but the fever and arthralgias, all these symptoms are very much similar to the other viral disorders that we have discussed. And the diagnostic armamentarium again remains the same. You have cards and no specific antigen per se, and we have to detect the antibodies that are developed against this viruses, rickettsial organisms in this particular case. And then rapid cards are available, and you have ELISAs where IgM positivity will tell you that you are having an acute disease. And if you have an IgG demonstrated, then you have a chronic or subacute kind of a disease profile. So ELISA's rapid CAR test for scrub typhus, and final confirmation can be done by molecular methods where it identifies the species of rickets also in this particular PCR-based testing. Zika test, it has been, it was a recent epidemic in some parts of the country like Kerala and all. So this again is a virus of some acute concern. So it has to be identified on an emergency basis in hospitals or diagnostic centers, where you again resort to rapid cards. If you have a positivity, though again cards will not have a great sensitivity and specificity, they can have a cross reaction with dengue and other viruses. So if you have a clinical profile and endemicity profile from where the patient is coming from, then you can start working in lines of Zika. And then that can be sort of confirmatively said that it is Zika by doing ELISA testing on the next stage. If that also comes equivocal, then we have to resort to molecular. There is here again Zika virus also coming from the same family of flavivirus. You have a specific antigen that can be detected both by ELISA and cards, and this can be demonstrated. If it is demonstrated, then you are dealing with Zika virus is something that we can tell with a significant amount of certainty. If that becomes equivocal, then we may have to go for molecular testing just as for any other viruses. So there was a mandate which was given by the government during the time of the endemic spread, where they were not able to identify and distinguish whether it is Zika or dengue or other viruses. Then in that case, for the benefit of doubt, one has to run Zika testing. So in summary, as I have told, the strong clinical background is a starting point because it gives you a lot of information as to what the clinical profile looks like and what the initial lab profile, the basic investigations of biochemistry, hematology, CBC parameters, all and endemicity in that particular region will give you a certain clue to what kind of acute viral or protozoal disease that you are dealing with. And then immediate diagnosis within a span of half an hour, you can make a diagnosis with a fair amount of certainty by using rapid CAR tests. And if the tests are equivocal and it is not actually matching with the clinical profile, then you have to go to the next level of doing ELISAs, which will give you more sensitivity and specificity. In every equivocal case where there is no strong evidence coming from the battery of tests that we have done till ELISAs, then we may have to go for molecular testing. That will sort of clinch and give an accurate diagnosis. But molecular tests will bear a high cost. Not be usually in calibrate and look after how good the rapid CAR tests are performing. They have to do it internally, and they have to correlate with the ELISAs and what they are having, and they should understand and have a basic accuracies of what they are doing in their labs before they suggest high-end and high cost molecular methods. So with that, I think all the basics are done. I think if there are any questions, I'm ready to take that, which will be much better, because most of the diagnostic armamentarium for all the disease that we have discussed, they are the same set, and it is just that the appropriate clinical scenario should prompt you to adopt to what kind of testing you require step after step. With that, I will hand it over to you.
Thank you, sir.
Any questions if they are there?
Sure. Thank you, doctor. Thank you so much, doctor. Dr. Srinivas, that was a very, very detailed and analytical approach that you adopted towards the testing of vector-borne diseases. I believe you've covered in depth all the key diseases, whether it's dengue, whether it's malaria, whether it's chikungunya. There are no dearth of vector-borne diseases. Eventually, anything that can travel on a vector becomes a vector-borne disease. But I believe that given your approach and when you focus on certain things, especially around malaria, which is now not that much of a danger as it used to be, or dengue, which is which is right now the clear and present danger. or Zika, which is coming up in the future and may evolve into it's a kind of a lookalike and affecting pregnant women at times in Kerala. We saw that you've covered everything, and very little scope actually for questioning, other than the fact that where do we go from here? Such an academician and practitioner as yourself, do you believe that the government is doing enough without being politically charged about it? What we can do in terms of at the national level, what would be your approach given your experience? How do we handle and prevent the outbreaks of dengue again in the future, or for that matter, Zika, which is still or hitherto still an unknown disease in lots of aspects?
Yeah, I could not hear you properly. There's a lot of noise in the background. What I could gather from you is that is government doing enough? Are they really prepared for any future outbreaks of dengue? Is that what you're asking?
Absolutely correct, sir. Yes, sir. That's the correct question that I had for you.
Sorry, can you hear me?
I can hear you, sir, loud and clear. My question was related to the
Sorry?
government policy. My question was related to the government policy. I think we are having some disturbance here. So, question was on government policy, and if
Your question is regarding the government's preparedness and government's willingness and policy. Is that what you're asking?
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. There is always, government always, there's almost, a lot desired from the government, but it's not, in terms of supporting the industry to help out in terms of, whenever there is an outbreak and what is the preparedness is what you're talking about.
Yes, doctor. That's the question I had.
Yes, sir. That is the question that I had.
Absolute silence. I can't hear anyone.
I think we're having some challenge with the audio, sir, today.
No audio.
Okay.
Anyone talking?
Yes, sir.
So, you're talking about the government policy. Okay. So, there's always a lot to be done from the government side. They're actually, if you are asking me about the preparedness or anything or support that they're going to give the private industry in collaboration with the government agencies to conduct this kind of testing, there's a lot that needs to be done and a lot of ground that needs to be covered. It's never enough coming from the government always.
All right. Thank you very much, doctor. Thank you very much for your time, sir. And our team will be reaching out to you shortly with the actual physical certificate and appreciation from our end. Thank you, doctor, for your time. And
any specific questions, basic questions from the audience that would be more appropriate? Any basic questions, even if they are very basic, they're welcome. Are some of the experiences that audience must be, having in their workplaces, and that can be discussed. Some of the instances where the diagnosis has become a little challenging, and all that aspects can be discussed if there are any.
problem with the audio, sir, today. Some problem with the audio.
Any questions in the chat box?
I put it in the chat box, sir. I put a question in the chat box.
Chat box. Okay. How Zika and dengue is related? Is there any cross-reactivities among these two diseases? Zika and dengue. they are, I mean, the similarities are they come from the same family of flaviviruses, but the cross reactivity is a very non-specific thing. The antibodies that can be there persistent for a long time in dengue can sometimes, if you do a Zika test for some other, illness which appears like Zika, then probably there may be a cross reactivity there. This is a issue, and if you can think like that. Otherwise, there's no need.
Okay,
So
was one-
these are the two questions. One is about the government policy and whether Zika and dengue are related. One more. So what is the role of NS1? NS1 is only in diagnosis. It's a specific antigen, and the NS1 of dengue is different. NS1 of Zika is different. These are all non-structural proteins of the viral structure, and that's a more specific antigen. Once you find that kind of an antigen presence, then you are very certain that you are dealing with dengue.
Okay, I think we've reached the end, sir, and thank you, sir, for your time. My audio is having some problems. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, I mean,
and
I'm not able to hear properly. There's a lot of breakage in the voice.
yeah, the sitting in the background, sir. Thank you for your time, sir, and
My pleasure.